I collaborated with my brother-in-law, Ted, who lives out in Maine, to make these tap handles. I actually made a few more than these, which I'll show in the video. We made these for my other brother-in-law who lives out in California. His name is Mark. And I made 3 different styles, actually 4. I made 2 that are carved. This dragon, and then I did a wood spirit in another one, kind of a wizard. But I made this style, and a T, and this style, which is, I have it tapered in 2 different directions with some chalkboard paint on them, so you can write on the kind of brew that he makes, because he makes several different kinds of beer. So Mark, if you're watching, I hope you enjoy these. Let's get to the build. Let's take it to Maine. Here's Ted.
Hey Mark, Ted here. It'd be kind of a fun way to communicate, I guess. So, as I've been talking about, I've been working on these, the beer taps. So, well, I've actually been working on the bed too. A friend of mine wants me to do that. So, all sort of recycled lumber. But anyway, back to this project. So, I had a bunch of hardwood, well, a bunch of miscellaneous wood kicking around here. And so, I just sort of made a rough shape. They're kind of challenging to cut because my bandsaw right there isn't really powerful enough. And of course, it's kind of tricky getting that on the table saw to cut those, and so we end up using this. Gallon cut it out with this skill saw. I mean this jigsaw, which is also kind of tricky, I guess. But we figured you're going to make it pretty anyway. So I've got some maple and some southern yellow pine. I guess it's white pine here. Pieces of birch, piece of cherry, some mahogany, and some alder. Piece of oak over here I had kicking around the shop, so I glued some 3/4 up together. Okay, let's get the whole board out. Take our threaded insert. This is a 3/8 bolt with some nuts that I locked together there to keep it from spinning all the way in. You can use just a screwdriver, but that takes a lot more effort. Here I can just thread it onto that bolt. Use my impact driver, set it in there. Like that. It's all good, and we'll send it off to Mark so we can make it pretty.
So I got the roughed out tap handles, and I set about to decide on a design for them. On the pine and oak, I decided to do a double taper design, and I utilized my table saw sled here to securely hold them, keep my fingers away from the blade. Once those were cut, I decided to cut off the tops of these T-shaped handles that we're making. It was just going to be easier to work with, to be able to sand, and so I decided to do that, and then I could cut the bottoms a little bit thinner, and then utilize my sled again to cut a taper on those bottom parts of these handles as well. Sanding the end grain, I also sanded all of the pieces down to 220 grit, so they were nice and well sanded before I glued them together. Before I could glue them together, I used this jig of sorts that I quickly made so that I could put a dowel in between them. I just had a mark on here and set it up for both the tops and the bottoms, and used the jig to guide my drill bit, and they set up pretty nicely together. Here I am putting epoxy in the holes, putting the dowel in, and then putting them together, letting them dry. The next step was to get ready to put the chalk paint on the tap handles. So I used painter's tape to mark out the area that I wanted that paint. I put down a primer first of just black paint, and then followed that up with 2 coats of the chalkboard paint. I then put painter's tape on the area that I had just painted. Of course, I let that dry for a couple days before I did that. That way I could finish the rest of it. This is a third linseed oil, a third mineral spirits, and a third polyurethane. And they turned out very nice. Then I moved on to the wizard I was going to carve. So I drew it here on the stick, and here you can see the progression as I carved. I didn't show the actual carving. I wish I would have made the hat a little bit taller, moved the head, designed it so the head was down a little bit farther. But I still think it turned out nice. Then I moved on to the dragon's head I was going to make. This was in maple. This was very hard to carve. But you can see the progression here, and I only used hand tools for this. I probably had 5 hours of carving time into this one. But it was nice to get outside. It was actually nice for early March here in Wisconsin. So that was a nice treat. And here they all are. I think they turned out nice. Mark, I hope you enjoy them. Thanks for watching. I appreciate the support.